name is Blake Allen. I am here with Eric Allen. How are you doing, Eric?
I'm wonderful, thank you.
Great. Yeah, and for everybody watching, this is kind of part of my series of podcasts for, kind of people in the tech industry that have kind of been hit in this recent round of layoffs. And anyone that's been watching my past couple kind of videos, there's a lot of people out here that have the right skills, the right experience, and, by no fault of your own, you've been kind of hit in this recent popular wave of layoffs that unfortunately we're kind of seeing going through the economy. Eric was a engineering leader at Domino Data Labs. Eric, I'll let you take it away and kind of delve into your background and, let people know what you're about.
So yeah, I'm an engineering manager. I've been in the tech industry for almost 25 years.
Okay.
In the last 5 years, I've been an enterprise architect and an engineering manager,
Mm-hmm.
as well as, an individual contributor. I've done a lot of work on modern cloud technologies. I love to work with people. I love the management position. I love the segue between people and product and
Mm-hmm.
making everybody successful. I'm great at growing and mentoring. I've had great mentors in my life, and I love to give back. Um, I set high standards for my team and myself. And, I teach people how to reach those high standards. And what I'm really known for is just getting things done, just rolling up my sleeves and getting the work done. I've written in 20 different languages.
Oh,
I
wow.
started my career with the Department of Defense. I actually wrote an assembly and released an entire update for the F-16 radar by myself. Some poor
Wow.
foreign military is flying around with my code. Um, I've worked, um, I've worked full stack, front end, back end.
Mm-hmm.
What I find that I love now is back end. I've done a lot of uh, the monolith to web services conversions, both an architect, a lead, and a developer in the different things. I really value um, just making the customer happy,
Mm-hmm.
delivering. I really value delivering.
I
Let's
see.
get let's get our code out there. Let's iterate to success.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I value. Oh, one guy I talked to, I loved it. I value working with great humans.
Okay.
Um,
I know that I myself obviously don't really have a good technical background, but from my observations as like an outsider looking in, I know that software development process can be pretty hectic, pretty crazy, whether it is front end or back end. And then just kind of backtracking a little, you mentioned you had like mentors and different things like that throughout your career. What I would say, like, what were maybe those biggest takeaways or things you learned from them that kind of contributed to that kind of passion you were talking about for the product life cycle?
it's right sizing product. Um, you know, Big organizations tend to have big product
Hmm.
process. It's understanding what guardrails we need to put in to be able to consistently deliver quality software to our customer.
Hmm.
Um, and so, I try to right size my product. One of the things that I really do is I'm very concerned with my developers having their time, being able to have time and large chunks of time to actually write code.
Hmm.
And so I'm big into minimal meetings and making things important. One of my great mentors was like, hey, we're going to cut down the time of our meetings, but that doesn't mean you're going to spend less time. That means you're going to come prepared. And
Hmm.
so, that's the kind of guy I am is, let's get the executive summary out there. Let's have a design discussion. Let's, have our daily stand-ups is a time for us to let everybody know what we're doing, ask a question, but it's not a time for us to design. That's what you do after the stand-up.
Hmm.
Um, I love to chat. One of the things I started at Domino with a fully remote team was a lunch, and the rule in the lunch was, we don't talk about work, but when we're talking about work, we need to focus on that.
Hmm.
And if you want to have that water cooler conversation, awesome. Let's just take it offline
Hmm.
so people can focus on their thing on getting their tasks done.
Hmm.
I like to like clarity. Understand what your task is, why you're doing it, and how that brings value to the customer,
Hmm.
and have a very clear definition of done.
I see.
At Domino, I worked with our QA org on defining a definition of done,
Hmm.
and that definition of done included a lot of things that we weren't doing at the time,
I see.
like release notes, like understanding how to actually deploy your software, writing documents for our customer service team so that they could debug the current feature set,
Hmm.
making sure we had automated testing, and really working hard on balancing our scope with our quality so that we could. I often call it in a startup environment transitioning between startup software and enterprise grade software.
Mm.
And all startups go through this where they, at the beginning, are quick and agile and fast and just trying to get things out there. And as they grow and their clientele gets bigger and demands more robustness and security and maintainability, we now need to migrate our software from the quick and dirty to the slower, more thought out, high performing, high availability software.
And I mean, I'm just kind of making observation here, but especially your experience kind of working in like different kind of military, working with, the U.S. government, the military, those are maybe even larger than enterprise and also a lot more slow, thought out. And there's so many different kind of factors you have to take in mind. How do you feel like that's a big strength you have, kind of working maybe at the high, how would I put, I'm kind of at a loss for the correct word. Maybe the super thought out, high end, super slow enterprise slash governmental level, and then kind of going all the way down to like the super small startup. Do you feel like that kind of gives you an edge over some of the other people in the space that maybe only have done startup to startup, or maybe their only hands-on experiences in a one medium-sized company and majority startups?
The military would, their general officers would be required to transition bases every about 3 years because they valued them having a breadth of experience where they could see new ideas and bring new ideas to everything else. The government was just bloated. Its
Mhm.
bureaucracy, its programs just required. They were slow. They weren't agile. I remember I was working on a product and we had warfighters in Afghanistan and they needed a new capability. They were dropping 2,000-pound bombs on houses that sat next to mosques and they were blowing the mosques up. And so they wanted to drop 500-pound bombs made out of concrete. So they put $1 million guidance package on a block of concrete and drop it on the house. But the F-16 didn't know how to drop a 500-pound bomb.
Mm.
And my bosses were like, we can't do that. We're a waterfall organization. It takes 5 years to produce a piece of software. A team that I was working on looked at that, and I was able to fake out the computer to be able to drop a 500-pound bomb of
Mm.
concrete in an agile, rapid fashion. So that's what I always see the difference between. I had some awesome junior engineers at Domino, but it's the only company they'd ever worked at. And so from my growth and mentoring perspective, I kept pairing them with other senior engineers who had different perspective on how things were done
Mhm.
so that you can understand what's good and bad in each organization. And that really goes back to right sizing your processes, right sizing your software. I'm a big fan of services. I've worked on code at the government it's a 25-year-old prototype they're still using, and it's 30 million lines of code. And you have to hire somebody, and it takes them 3 years to even understand how to really maintain that code base without breaking things.
Mhm.
Um, but just because I love services doesn't mean it's the right design pattern or fit for your
Mhm.
current development position. A monolith is faster to develop at the beginning.
Mhm.
And so you really have to balance where you are in your company's life cycle
Mhm.
with where you can be. I mean, startups are quick and dirty. Let's get something out there. And like I said, that transition, which I've done at a couple different companies, is hard. It's hard to then take a look at your software and take a look at your processes and produce successful iterative software And that's, as I've led people through there, it's, let's not let, well, what's the saying? Let's not let perfect stop us from doing good.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so we need to be very pragmatic in our approaches,
Mm-hmm.
pragmatic in, our processes. We need to really understand our customers
Mm-hmm.
and where we are. So at Domino, I was in charge of a team that owned the Kubernetes clusters. We deployed those clusters to any of the three major webs as well as on-prem. And we were averaging, when I inherited the team, an outage every 2 weeks.
Oh.
And so I sat down and analyzed, over 100 outages we'd had on my team's specific code to understand where we were and how we got to something better. And through that analysis, we were able to actually quickly sure up a lot of places in our code to the point that we were getting an outage, once a quarter,
Mm-hmm.
which instead of running around putting out the latest fire, then we could sit back and decide on, is it a new feature? Is it reliability? Which one are we working on? Are we refactoring? Are we adding a new feature? I'm a real fan of, if you see something, fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's too big to fix, then let's create a story for it, and then
Mm-hmm.
we can prioritize it.
Yeah.
As an engineering manager, I love working with programs and UX and customers, but I also defend my developers and defend our decisions on whether we need to put a new feature in or
Mm-hmm.
whether we should be doing backlog. Um,
And I would imagine that especially in a startup environment, there's such a pressure to create new features, to kind of push things along at times that it's hard, or you need someone experienced like yourself that can kind of look at the business leaders and kind of say, hey, I know you want this done fast. I know you want this ASAP, but you need to watch out for this. Yeah.
yeah, I'm very hands-on. I believe as a technical leader, I should be a technical leader. I should be inside, whether that's writing code or whether that's just really understanding where we are.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I was delivering a feature set and we had some genealogical data in the database, but it wasn't set up to retrieve the genealogical data. And I'm just like, we can't add that feature. We need to refactor that database, which was actually an open source tool we were using. So that would require us creating a pull request against the open source tool and fixing that.
Mm-hmm.
And my product management's like, that's okay. Our customers don't have a lot of data right now. And I'm like, no, we need to not shoot ourselves in the foot.
Yeah.
And we need to make this enterprise grade now so we don't have to fix it in the future.
Mm-hmm.
But we were at a position, I think, in the company that we had enough backing, we had enough traction in the industry to start doing some of that enterprise. When you're right at the beginning, you're trying to create a feature set.
Yeah.
You're almost prototyping a lot of things. It's like, here, we think a feature you're going to like. Oh, they don't like it. Well, that's cool. We didn't spend a lot of time on it. We
Mm-hmm.
got it out there. The problem is it becomes the 25-year prototype that I worked on with the government where,
Yeah.
you know, nobody liked it, but they couldn't fix it.
This is probably not the best parallel, but I used to work for Verizon and Verizon Media, and like they'd roll out software updates and they'd have parts of the system that you'd pull up a front end web page and the UX coming up was like from 1995 and the request wouldn't go through and so many things were just done so badly. And I was always like, this is like an S&P 500 company. What's going on? What are we doing here? And nobody really had an answer. They just said, well, kind of like the government, it is what it is. This is what we got. And we'll just kind of throw more trash on the trash heap as we move along. And I think you probably working in enterprise space, you've seen that enough times where it's like, what is the saying? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But theirs is like, it's broke, but we're not really planning on fixing it. I don't know how to put that out there.
You know, I was working on I was working with a team and I'm talking with the product manager about a new feature, and I saw a new feature that they really were excited about coming down the pipeline. And I looked at my code and I just knew it wasn't going to be an easy fit.
Mm-hmm.
We were going to have to pound the square peg into the round hole.
Yeah.
That to me flags we need to refactor. We know more about our product,
Mm-hmm.
that we need to have a design that takes in both of these things. I was working basically the CTO at a small company that did gift cards, and now they were printing on three-dimensional objects, and our software was originally made for paper.
Mm-hmm.
And so instead of, we had to figure out, instead of just sort of, in the past they had just kludged any three-dimensional objects, any things that was outside of the basic gift card into their code, and it didn't work well. It took a lot of effort. Oftentimes we would have to massage the data from customers because it wouldn't actually render.
Mm-hmm.
And so taking that opportunity to look back and say, if we refactor now, we can take these new concepts, these new understanding of what we need to do, and create a design where everything fits instead of trying to bash something in.
Mm-hmm.
One, characteristics I've always had in my career is I'm a lot on the creative side. Some people call it lazy, but I want to find a creative solution instead of hard coding, instead of brute forcing something.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes me really successful in the sense that my software is a lot more flexible.
Mm-hmm.
And as changes come up, there's a lot less software to maintain.
Mm-hmm.
And since you've tried to figure out how all of these things correlate
Mm-hmm.
and write a piece of code that works around this principle, you
Mm-hmm.
find a lot of new requirements fit into it.
Mm-hmm.
You find that you can test it a lot simpler because you're not testing 100 different ways that you've hard coded things in. You're testing one way with a bunch of different variables. You're testing the boundaries, and you're testing the robustness of that system. And so, as I work with a lot of junior engineers, the thing I really want to teach them is ask questions. It's a very positive thing to ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
Coming out of college, if you copied somebody's code, it was called plagiarism, and
Yeah.
they kicked you out of school. And in industry, we call it reuse. And if you're not willing to do it, then I'm going to have to get rid of you, because what I hire you to do is do specific things for the company that I'm working for, our unique special sauce. And creating a table is not something we do. We need a table, but you go out and find a table, you implement that table in your code, and you
Mm-hmm.
go on with life. I did that once at a company, and they kept coming back with requirements. They're like, does the table do this? And I'm like, sure it does. Does the table do this? And I'm like, sure it does. Because I didn't write a table on my own. I went and found one that somebody had spent a lot of effort on, and it had all the feature sets they could ever want. And I was able to go back and go, what is this? What is the special sauce that we are
Mm-hmm.
trying to produce, instead of sitting down and it's homework. I need to learn how to do this.
Yeah.
I struggle with math theorems,
I see.
proofs. I'm like, I don't care. I trust that the guy knew that proved that this math equation worked. I just want to implement it. I'm a very hands-on, practical application kind of guy instead of a theoretical kind of guy.
Mm-hmm.
When as an architect, I realized that the architects I really valued loved to find new things that they wouldn't necessarily need right now, but they added them to their tool belt. And I
Mm-hmm.
realized I was the guy that found the solution I needed today and
Mm-hmm.
solved my problem. And I wouldn't dig around for solutions that I didn't have a problem for yet.
Yeah.
And so that's what made me realize that, yeah, I can architect an awesome system, but what do I love to do? And I love
Mm-hmm.
to work with people. I love to see the career growth, and I love to see the success of the business.
That's I would say that's a solid skill set, or like an important, how do I put it, like a prioritization method, not only, in engineering, not only in business, but that's actually something that in many branches of the military, the reason I bring it up, you have the military background, is what's important, what's important now. So you fix your problem now, but in the back of your mind, you need to be orienting yourself to future problems as well.
I'm a completely uncoordinated person. I hate playing with any game that requires a ball, but I feel like management's a lot about juggling. It's
Mm.
a lot about understanding what balls I really need to keep in the air and what balls can I leave on the table for right now. But I understand that there's that ball out there. There is that feature that we need to refactor, that we need to change to high availability, that we need to work on, but it's not a priority right now. And
Mhm.
so that ball is sitting there waiting for when it's the right time for me to throw it into the juggling routine.
Mhm.
And to be able to defend my decisions, to defend my team, to be able to have those technical discussions. I'm not always right. I love compromise. I love working with people and just coming to great solutions and great products
Hmm.
as a team.
Yeah.
The reason I've written in 20 languages, it's just roll up your sleeves and get it done.
Yeah.
I think it's important that we understand what we're good at. I think it's important that we understand what we love to do.
Hmm.
But I think it's also important that we understand that we're a team. And as a team, we all have to do things that we don't like, and we all
Yeah.
have to roll up our sleeves. As a team, we should be willing to do whatever we can to help somebody else out. So I was delivering a feature at my last company, and we were behind the eight ball, and we weren't getting it done. And so, I added more people to that particular product. We reduced scope. We had to have people jump in and do things that they wouldn't normally do. We squeezed all the testing time out. So instead of having our assigned QE able to test the entire release, we needed parallel testing, which means all the engineers had to jump in and test. And maybe that's not something they like to do, but we are going to produce a successful product, and that means we're going to jump in. I love when you create that relationship, when people understand each other and value each other to the point that you ask them a question and they're willing to take time to
Hmm.
give you an answer. As an engineer, I can solve all the problems. I just can solve them faster if I ask people questions and get their input, their background, their knowledge.
Hmm.
Um, Often I say if you don't have it, that's okay. I can go solve it. But I'm looking for somebody to bounce ideas off. I'm looking for somebody who may have done something like what I need to do to
Hmm.
give me a leg up, because it's not about putting my name on code
Of
or my
course.
name on a product. It's about our team succeeding.
Hmm. And I think it's, you know, just something my observation being in the industry, to I won't name names, but I have seen many, people in the managerial side of things that, when it comes to the hands-on things, they've sort of lost the touch a little bit, to be quite frank. They don't know the newest version of Python. They don't know a lot of these, up-to-date, most recent skills, and that's just something that comes, or I've seen in many situations, like the nature of the beast. So it is kind of rare, Eric, to see somebody that can, if you had to, you could go hands on, so to speak, and get in there and code. Um, but you understand that that's a waste of your time. That's not really what you should be doing.
Yes, yes. One of my earliest mentors was delegation. Trust your people, delegate to them, follow up, make sure that they're on the right path. Um, I'm very careful to watch the sprint and understand when somebody is trying to understand when somebody's getting lost, when they're going down a rabbit hole that we don't need to go down to, or
Hmm.
when they discover something that we never thought of and we need to make the change. My CTO at my last company is like, "You're the only guy that marks your projects as yellow," and I'm like, "Yeah, but that project has risk. It's not. We are afraid we're not going to meet schedule or feature set, and I want to bring that up as early as possible so we can have discussions about how do we recover from this."
Hmm.
Um, I got hired at a company, and it was odd. They were like, "How would you fix our software?" And they described their problems, and I presented them an architectural solution. Just I thought it was just an interview question. They're like, "Oh, that's really good. Can you do a presentation for our CEO?" And so part of the process was I presented to the CEO. I got into that company, and my manager, he wasn't technical. And he wasn't technical because he lost his technical ability. He wasn't technical because he was a business guy that just happened when their technical guy quit to take over the position.
Hmm.
And after I had a few meetings with the engineers and asked a whole bunch of really pointed questions, he came back and said, "Hey, you need the job. I'm gonna step aside and do what I'm good at, and you come in and do what you're good at." He's
Hmm.
like, I go talk with them, and I have no clue what they're doing, and I just have to accept their timelines. And you come out with a solution that's quick and dirty and gets
Hmm.
us moving where we need to go, instead of, hey. It seemed like my devs at that point always came back with, "Yeah, it'll take 6 months," because they were really big thinkers, and they wanted to design for every inevitability, and I'm like, we don't have the budget for that. We can't afford you to disappear for 6 months. We are trying to put a product out for Christmas, and we need to do it this year, not next year. It's October. And so I would just cut it to the bare bones. We were trying to change our access controls at Domino, and they had a really kludged old access project that would, instead of explicitly saying you could access something, it would infer that you could access it. And they put a team out there and they waterfalled, gave them 6 months to come up with a new solution. And then they started asking my team to implement their solution. And I started asking a whole bunch of questions. So they've spent 6 months, and I started asking a whole bunch of questions like, can we use the old and the new one at the same time? And they looked at me and said, yes. And then the other guy looked at me and said, no. So their lead engineer and their manager, and they're like, we'll have to get back with you. And they're like, come back, and like, no. I'm like, okay, I assumed it was no, but who's going to migrate those controls? And they're like, you are. And they're like, we are. And I'm like, okay, who's going to migrate the controls? Just a minute, we'll come back with you. The project actually got canceled because after I started asking these pointed questions, they realized that the thing they'd spent 6 months building didn't work.
Yeah.
They couldn't transition from where we were to where they were in a reasonable time frame. And so they just threw up their hands and canceled the product. That wasted 6 months. Those are questions that obviously should have been asked right up front. We should have been aiming on not just creating in isolation a system, but creating a system that can get us from where we are to where we want to be.
Do you think that was a lack of pressure testing in the beginning?
It was a lack. It was taking some really smart, awesome engineers and giving them, how would you do this from scratch? And they went out and they designed this awesome system, and they thought about all of these contingencies, but they never once sat down with an engineer that was going to use this and said and started asking, because I was asking all of these implementation questions. How am I going to get from where I am today to where you are? Like I said, can I use both of them? Because that means I can change endpoints one at a time instead of all at once. How are we going to migrate our old data to our new data? Like I said, we had implicit controls, so you can't just do a data migration because there was permissions in there that weren't they were calculated. They weren't stored in the database. And so we would have to make sure, and this is permissions. Our customers were things like healthcare companies where the data scientists would actually couldn't see the data. They were by HIPAA regulations couldn't see the data they were working on. They could see the end results, and so permissions had to work. This is not something that we could have working and then slip up on, and so it was a big deal to make sure that it was okay to say you had access to yesterday and you don't have access to today because you're not getting somebody things they shouldn't see. You're just stopping them from seeing things they should see. And that's not good, but it's better than having a data breach. But we needed a very clear understanding that this system worked and that the migration worked. And so we should have started from the beginning working on this, like, where do I want to be? But then how do I get there from where I am? And they never put that effort into how to get there. And so they created a system because they weren't thinking of this that didn't create a good path between that. The solution at one point was our CTO and our principal engineer were going to sit down and spend weeks hand converting all of this stuff because they were the only two that thought they knew enough about the system to figure out these rules on conversion. And of course, then they realized they didn't have weeks to just focus on this. They had a company to run.
Of course. There's like so many, I mean, even just like as an outsider looking in, more so what you talked about being an end user. I remember at one point, Verizon, they updated all their POS systems and all their order systems. And when they rolled that out, I had this exact thought that you talked about a minute ago. I said, all the engineers, the software engineers and the, agile teams that design this have no idea what we do, because I can tell that whoever made this logically made sense in someone's head. But when you go to hands-on to use it, there's so many like jumps you have to make that are non-sequential that luckily myself, like, I would just play with it until I make it work. But it's like, I'm sure like 80% of people were just looking at it like, what is this thing?
So I worked at a company as a front engineer, and we installed satellite dishes on your roof for
Hmm.
internet.
Hmm.
And I got this new requirement. I went and developed the new requirement, and I went and showed it off to the guy that gave me the requirement, did a prototype, and he's like, "Oh, it's awesome." And I'm like, "Hold on, let me go show this to the installers." And I don't know why I hadn't thought of it before, but as I started to show it to the installers, I realized this don't work because the boss sits at a 1080p monitor, and they're sitting on somebody's roof with a cell phone. And I actually went back and gathered requirements from them. So I had a product that worked for the boss, the manager, who wanted to see a whole bunch of, it was the tables that I was talked about earlier. He was seeing tables and reports and graphs. And my guys on the roof just really wanted to install equipment. And so it's like, use the phone camera to scan a barcode on a piece of equipment so it updates their inventory and everything. And so I took that opportunity to go back and design a mobile first decision for them and actually go out with them and have them test that. Another time I actually sat at the call center when our new software was deployed.
Oh,
And
wow.
it's really important to understand what the customer's needs are. Going back to a bias towards delivery, it's let's not design the Mona Lisa. Let's design something that's adequate, and then let's see where the customer wants us to go. Because I find oftentimes the things that we think are going to be nifty features, they're not. People don't want them. And we could save ourselves time and money by asking our customer, by
Hmm.
showing them something. I think, if you're designing software for a Walmart cashier, you should go and be a Walmart cashier.
Hmm.
You should see what they're doing. If you're gathering requirements, you should talk to them. You should understand what they do. I mean, it's a cashier. You're going to train new cashiers all the time, so your software should be intuitive instead of
Hmm.
being training. So we should spend more money on making it easy for them to use and not have to teach them how to use a specific product. And
Hmm.
so understanding your customers and really designing for them, and again, bringing out things in an iterative fashion where you allow them to try something and give you feedback, um, leads us to wonderful solutions.
Hmm. That is, I don't know. That's like what do they always say? Product market fit, all that kind of stuff. But it's like you said, the end user. If the end user can't use it, you just made a really fancy piece of junk.
Well, oftentimes, we have to sell our software, right? As
Yeah.
a developer, we just want to be a pure developer and we write awesome code for awesome code. But I
Yeah.
love salesmen because, they keep my company employed and I keep getting a salary and I keep getting to write awesome code. Um, but who are we selling to?
Yeah.
At Domino, we were selling to a high level manager who was buying a package of software for his data scientists.
Hmm.
Um, and so that was very important to have features that he thought were valuable.
Yeah.
But the end day, he probably didn't use a lot of the software. It was his data scientists that were doing it. I
Hmm.
loved our product in the sense that we took a whole bunch of complex things out of the hands of data scientists and let them just do data science. They didn't have to worry if their data set was in Europe and couldn't be moved off Europe servers. They only got to select Europe servers. It was obfuscated to them all of these things that they really didn't want to do. They really wanted to do cool data science and all these smart things that I can't do and don't want to do. And I wanted to write awesome software. And so you've got to get past just the sales and like, yeah, we're going to sell this, but what do our customers really need?
Hmm.
What is really going to add value to their life? How are we going to make their job better?
I agree with you. I like it's like when I use Salesforce, I like that they've dumbed it down because I mean, I used to be a Salesforce developer, but I hate filtering everything down even if I know how to do it. I don't want to, you know. I prefer it dumb.
Like I said, I've written in 20 languages and I can write code in assembly. I can write code in basic. I can write code in, um, C or C++. But yeah, I like the new modern languages where I can just use a lot of libraries and things that,
Mhm.
that dumb it down. Because I want to focus again back on what is the special sauce to the company, not how to create a linked list.
Hmm.
you know, not to manage pointers.
Yes.
I need to understand that behind the ground, this is how everything works.
Hmm.
But once I understand that, I don't want to have to manipulate it. I want to be able to, as quickly as possible, create a robust system for my customer. I want to worry about data. I want to worry about security. I want to worry about scalability and maintainability, not how to, create a hash table.
I like that. And I guess looking at all your past work and just kind of talking about, what you like and what you're passionate about and what you did with Domino, where do you see yourself going in the future? Or what are you gearing towards, I should say?
Yeah, what do I value? I really value a culture. I value a culture of people that want to succeed. I value a culture of people with no egos,
Yes.
a very collaborative environment. I value a company that's really focused on making it a great place to work and a great product for our customers.
Hmm.
Um, I value a place where we can fail,
Okay.
where people can take leaps of faith and produce awesome things because they understand if they fail, that's okay. Um, I value, what I love as a manager is I value um, being able to lead people to do hard things, interesting problems, and I love when I give something to an engineer and I see a little fear in their eyes because I know I'm pushing them.
Hmm.
And I know then that I need to help them or get them help so that they can do something harder than they think they can do.
Hmm.
And so we can all grow and we can all produce things. Um, I'm always looking for somebody that's going to replace me, you know, or replace my principal engineer or replace my architect. Whichever path you want to do in your career, I want to get you there.
Hmm. It's, I think that what you mentioned about pushing people is true in whatever field you are in, because even some of my best supervisors, I've been doing sales, really all, that's all my experience up to this point. And my best managers were like, they knew I could do it. And then they're like, okay, but you're going to go 10% more. And in the back, if my manager sees this, hey, I love you, Andy, but in the back of your head, you're always like, God damn it. But you're like, I know I can do that. So it's good to get that little push in the right direction.
That's how I get those senior engineers or me or myself that are just like, I have no idea how to do that, but I'm not worried. I'll figure it
Mhm.
out. Um, so when I take somebody that's not a senior and give them something that's scared, it just means I need to be more on top of it. It
Yeah.
means I need to be making sure that they don't get stuck somewhere and just spin their wheels.
Hmm.
Um, and so it,
That's that.
there's the term management and leadership, and I really love the term leadership because I'm a leader. I
Mhm.
can I can keep all the balls in the air, and that's part of my job. But I really want to lead. I really want to grow. I really want to stretch people and stretch what we define as awesome.
Mhm. Is there any particular, I would say, like industry or like products you're gearing towards, or is it just you're very open to whatever possibilities come your way?
It's culture.
Okay.
It's culture. It's like I said, I worked for the military. I worked for a religious organization. I've worked in some small startups and some huge organizations. What I found looking back at my career, the places I didn't like were places that were accepting mediocrity. When I think we can, no matter where we are, we can do awesome,
Hmm.
and that doesn't require us to work crazy amount of hours. That just requires us to set our sights higher.
Yeah. No, I like the way you put that. That is you can get a lot done if you have an applied 8 hours versus a passive 10 hours.
So I sat down with my principal engineer, and he's like, "I'm not going to get this project done." And I'm like, "Okay, let's sit down." And we pulled up his calendar, and I'm like, you know, oh, you have an interview you have to do for somebody? I'll do that for you. Oh, we need this documentation. I can write that. Oh, you need this? We can have this other person do it. And all
Hmm.
of a sudden, this meeting's optional for you. And I just cleaned up his calendar. Um, and all of a sudden, he had huge swaths of time because we got to get this feature out.
Hmm.
That meeting might have been a good meeting for you to attend if this was a regular week, but this isn't.
Yeah.
He actually went to my boss afterward and said, I was so thankful for Eric. We were able to get this out because he just cleared it up. He didn't feel like he had, and so maybe that's something I did wrong. He didn't feel like he had a permission to make those kind of judgment calls.
Mm-hmm.
And I trusted him implicitly, but I guess I hadn't expressed that to him enough.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I gave him permission to let other things fall so that he could really focus on this is what's important. And so keeping people focused and understanding the priorities.
Mm-hmm. I think that, everything you've kind of said, and I would definitely say, anybody I'm going to put some tags in here at the end of the video. I don't like to what is it, over pump you up, but definitely you had some very good points that I've done a couple of these, and as people will see as the episodes come out, like you actually had a lot of wisdom, quite honestly, Eric, that I think a lot of people would appreciate. No, I'm not joking. This is actually, I'm dead serious.
I'm good at what I do.
Yeah.
You know why I'm good at what I do? I've got 8 kids. I've been doing this for 25 years.
Oh,
my son, my oldest son is a CS junior right now in CS,
Okay.
And so my senior engineer at the last place, because I came in as an individual contributor,
Mm-hmm.
and the goal was 3 to 6 months as an individual contributor, and then I would lead a new team. And within like a month, they're like, nah, just lead a new team. And so I inherited a new team, and I got a couple people, and we hired additional people. My senior engineer came back as we both got laid off, and he's like, you did awesome, You were able to come up to speed, and you were able to make it a really enjoyable place to work. I'm like, okay, that's what I want. I want to balance the product and balance the people.
Mm-hmm.
This worked really well.
Yeah.
I was skeptical at first, but it felt so natural. Thank you.
Quite honestly, like someone like you that has that hands-on, this is why, I like doing this, because you talk about what you want to talk about, and that's what's important. And I think it's important too that I'm trying to do something that's more hopeful. Like all we see is like negativity. And this is not going to be something that directly benefits myself. It's not going to be through Robert Half, most likely.
Mm-hmm.
It's more so what I find in the technology industry, especially here in the Bay Area, is like, one, we're connected to the whole country. 2, it's like a circle. So it's like you're looking for something now, but in the future, like I may need your help with something,
Yep.
And it's just this kind of big circle. And I like being around intelligent people that kind of teach me stuff. Like just listening to you, I learned a lot of things that I kind of understood, but didn't understand that well. But someone like you with hands-on experience, it just makes it, especially for business type people, sales type people, I think it's hard to bridge that gap. And I think that it's hard to find people that have like the hands-on that are willing to like do that explanation and bridge that gap. Because there's a lot of people that are just like, oh, well, you're dumb and you don't understand CS and blah. Like my half brother, he's really smart, really kind, but like when I start talking to him sometimes, he just races ahead of me, and I'm like, okay, keep in mind, I am.
So I consider myself bilingual. I speak English and tech. It's not that they're egotistical. It's that they really have a trouble when they understand something. So just it's obvious to them to be able to step back and explain that. When I was teaching my kids math, I'm an electrical engineer by training, and so I took huge levels of math. And I remember my dad always saying, who was also an electrical engineer, this would be easier with calculus. This would be easier with calculus. And I got to calculus, and he's like, son, I haven't done calculus in 20 years. I told my son the same thing when he got calculus. But if you understand it so intrinsically, it's really hard to think about what steps did you do in your brain to get you there? And so I've worked for a lot of years on being able to, I talk to my wife and try to explain to her, who's a super non-technical person, what I'm doing, and see if she can stay awake. And so, but it's important in my position, because it's important in my position to be able to talk to my tech person and understand where they're going and understand the pitfalls or the problems they're going to see, and be able to talk to anybody else in the world who speaks English and explain it at their level where we're going and why we're doing it.
Absolutely. I think one of the things too is like kind of going back on that like hopefulness part is like, how do I put this? Like all we see is like negative stuff every day, and people like yourself, it's like, okay, you were hitting this round of layoffs, but you have so much, like, so many different experiences you've had and hands-on skills. And yes, you're a manager, but you've done all these different things that it's even hard in an interview to really wrap that all into 30 minutes that someone's going to talk to you, or 45 minutes. And you don't really get to talk about what you want to talk about. You talk about what they tell you to talk about, because I've done interviews. That's just how it works,
You're on stage.
Yeah.
I call it, I'm trying to be the person I want to be, but I'm acting. I'm on stage. I'm pretending that I have no fears. I'm pretending that I'm awesome at everything I do. But I'm a humble person.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a team-driven person. When a product gets released, my name's not on it. It's our team,
Mm-hmm.
and it's hard to accept and talk about things in the way that they want you in an interview, which is I did this. I led a team that wrote 3 million lines of code. I did yeah, my team was awesome.
Yeah.
I just happened to be there for the ride. No, I hope I guided and directed and I'm a force multiplier, right?
Yeah.
I don't write code on a day-to-day basis anymore, but what I'm doing is making sure that the code they write is going in the right direction,
Mm-hmm.
that they know the path they have, that they can make the smart decisions,
Mm-hmm.
that they can have their schedule cleared so they can really focus on what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. Well, I had an important thought and it just flew over my head. But the biggest thing is that there is going to be opportunity. Things are coming down the line. I think if people watch this and they understand your methodology and your thought process, what they read on a resume is great. But I've had interviews or even, how do I put it? Like, let's say somebody just bombs an interview, but they're actually really, really solid. And that's the one thing I see in the industry, is that I've had candidates that are like, they'll destroy every technical test you put in front of them. They're really great to work with. I've seen clients love them, and then they get into an interview and they're like, they just freak out. I don't know what it is. And I know that you're not that person, but I think this gave you a good, and the other people that I'm doing these similar things with, it just lets you go off in what you're passionate about and lets people see that.
Yeah, that's why people would prefer to hire somebody as referral, when you actually know the value of the person instead of the quick 30-minute conversation.
Exactly. Hey, Eric, thanks for taking the time out. Anybody that's kind of watched this, Eric is mainly looking for organizations that are going to be pretty much any industry. More so, it's going to be a culture fit that we're looking for. Is that correct, Eric?
That is.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you for taking the time out, and you have a great afternoon. Okay, Eric?
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.